went through the digital age, right? We started gathering a lot of data. And the reality is we use like less than 2% of our data. And I think really what that breaks down as is like, how does the data get connected to a decision workflow? How does it get served up into the right parts of the organization? And data sets that exist at the IT level, the enterprise level versus the operational level, you know, everyone's not operating off the same data set. Our fundamental belief was, if you don't change things for the people on the factory floor, if you don't change things sort of at the first principles level, then there's no point in sort of aggregating and rolling it up and making these more broader enterprise decisions.
This is All Quiet on the Second Front, a podcast where boring conversations around defense tech and national security come to die. Join me, Tyler Sweatt, and my Second Front homies as we dismantle the mundane and cut through the bureaucratic bullshit to demystify the world of defense tech. But be warned, this is not a typical government podcast. Are you ready to get weird?
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm your host, Tyler Sweatt. Welcome to another episode of All Quiet on the Second Front, the podcast where boring defense talk comes to die. Really excited. One of the companies I think I've really just enjoyed the most watching, not just the transformation, but the team they're building and the impact, and being able to just be a fanboy from the side. Got Troy Demmer from Gecko Robotics here. So Troy, thanks for swinging by, brother.
For having me, Tyler. Great to be here.
Heck yeah, man. So we usually open with a little bit of kind of like, who are you? What are you working on? What's your story? All of that. So, give the people sort of a once over the moon on you and Gecko so we can get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Gecko's a cool technology company that was developed really on the premise of we don't fundamentally understand the built world around us well enough. So that led us to develop a pretty complicated technology stack across hardware and software, kind of at a first principles level. We go and diagnose the health of the built world by using sensors. It could be acoustics, electromagnetics. These are things that I learned a lot about from my prior history in the medical industry, and we adapted that kind of sensing technology to things like steel and concrete and composites, and put those on different form factors. Our first sort of platform was a robotic crawler, but since then we've adapted different form factors to be able to get to some of the hardest, most dangerous places to get to. So we have now robots that can fly and swim as well. And what's really interesting is, it's not just about the robot that gathers the data, that sort of gives you sort of the insights to then make the decisions that need to be made. So some of the big value creation creators from this technology stack is just visibility into the current health of my infrastructure, to how am I going to plan for the future? What is the life cycle management of some of our critical assets? So it's really a software layer that allows for more intelligent decision-making for this kind of longitudinal view across steel, concrete, and composites. And there's a lot of other interesting data sets out there that help us to understand, how can you best use these assets, operational data, environmental data, that all sort of gets merged together and combined into into an engine that we call cantilever.
As you talk about sort of the crawling robots and the ability to sort of extract and collect this interesting data, where does you alluded to a little bit, hey, drew on some of the learnings from some of your background in the medical industry, like where's that idea come from, and where are you guys sitting? Like, we should build a robot that goes out and crawls and starts to collect data. Like, how's that become the thing?
Yeah, the origin story is really fun. It actually started in Grove City College, where Jake and myself went to school. This was now almost 12 years ago. And there was actually an alumni of the school who ran a merchant power plant. Think about 40,000, 50,000 people getting power. This power plant was able to burn any kind of input like biomass, trash, waste coal that was left over from the, sort of coal mining days. And so it was a very, kind of contained environment for us to actually learn about the problem. And the problem was this facility only operated about 60, 70% of the time. the other 30-40% of the time, they're sort of chasing their tail, right? Trying to get ahead of problems that were going to occur. And again, it sort of was just not this comprehensive, visible view into like what's going on beneath the surface, right? I can look at things, I can, take some surface measurements, but you couldn't really see through the walls of this critical infrastructure that's been there for, 20, 30, 40 years. And so this alumni of the school brought us this problem. And so we very much were kind of purpose built. We worked backwards from that. Our lab was that power plant up in northwestern PA, and it gave us the access to the problem. And so we were just very sort of pragmatic about how we built the first concept of the robot, the version 1, and we've since iterated that 5 times, major versions, to be able to do all the things, all the environments, materials, and geometries that it can do today.
It's one, an awesome just origin story to your point. And two, as you think about whether it's a power plant, but think about sort of like physical infrastructure, right? I think so much in, today's day and age, we talk about sort of like the speed at which software is moving, sort of, through these evolutionary and sort of revolutionary cycles. Like that, the built world, the physical infrastructure stays, right? That time horizon, you say it's desynchronized from software, right? It's decoupled. How do you guys navigate thinking about the amount of change that might be happening in one side of the ecosystem, with maybe it's almost like an industrial and knowledge age worlds that you're kind of fusing together? How do you guys approach that and see that?
Yeah, to quote one of our, customers and partners, said, we went through the digital age, right? We started gathering a lot of data. And the reality is we use like less than 2% of our data. And I think really what that breaks down as is like, how does the data get connected to a decision workflow? How does it get served up into the right parts of the organization? And, a lot of times the disparate data sets that exist at the IT level, the enterprise level versus the operational level, everyone's not operating off the same data set. You have the folks at the corporate standpoint operating off of enterprise data, and you have the folks sort of running the facility that are sort of making the valuable thing, whatever that may be, an electron, or refining some metal into an alloy, some sort of critical process. Those folks have a completely different set of data that they're looking at and different set of tools. And so there is a chasm that exists there. And our fundamental belief was, if you don't change things for the people on the factory floor, if you don't change things sort of at the first principles level, then there's no point in sort of aggregating and rolling it up and making these more broader enterprise decisions. So we really connect sort of many stakeholders, present them with similar sources of information, maybe just presented with different cuts, and then everyone can weigh in on the same decision. And then that then basically drives, hundreds of millions of dollars of decisions. And like, do we recapitalize this asset? How do we recapitalize that? How do we get more efficient on, a sustaining CapEx program across, 40, 50-year-old assets? And, how are we going to, make targeted, get high value ROI on actually maintaining and sustaining our infrastructure?
Yeah, there's an interesting, like change management, organizational sort of transformation challenge, and they're like beneath the nuances and the intricacies of the technology, right? You're taking folks who, and whether it's the factory floor or it's, I always use like the vertical integration of a factory, right? It's 2 levels up. There's been some data, there's been some sensors, but like a plethora of data and real data informed decisions is a little bit of a cultural change, right? Like you're not going to ask sort of the foreman or the shift lead or something like that. How do you guys work with, or how have you seen success working with organizations that maybe are, not anti-technology, but maybe don't trust it or aren't familiar with it, and you're kind of helping to maybe bring them along and help them sort of increase their capacity, not replace them?
Yeah, it's the single largest source of competition for Gecko. It's actually the customers sort of inertia, right? In a lot of ways, that inertia was set up well. And some of the lessons that I drew from even my healthcare experience prior to starting Gecko, we went through the process to really hammer out clinical pathways and really reduce the variability and sort of, in some ways it served the outcomes, but in other ways it rendered the practitioner to have, more rails and fewer sort of abilities to just use their discipline to make the right informed decisions at the right points of time. So it's about providing tools. It's about providing, it's about actually enabling the human to do higher value add work with, robust tools that, take away the sort of redundant, mundane kind of tasks of gathering a point measurement over and over again and replicate that 10,000 times, or manipulating data and crunching data and making those sort of transformations of that data and those cuts just single clicks instead of spending all your time analyzing the information. And then you can really start to layer in the critical thinking and what other sorts of information do I need to make this the most sound decision. For us, that's been the focus, is to really create more leverage for everyone that's involved, because let's be honest, the folks that power the world, that make our turn rare earth minerals into steel and are the backbone of manufacturing.
Oh yeah.
These folks are really like they're really good at what they do, and it's a lot of subject matter expertise that's been sort of just tribally understood over many years. And so you need that's key. You can't just totally automate that away. But it needs augmentation. It needs it needs more data. It needs better tools to be able to leverage that.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about sort of bringing data and tools to augment, right? I think you see similar sort of parallels, whether it's in criminal or critical infrastructure or national security, where you've got pushes for robotics and autonomy and things like that, and folks trying to figure out, how do I employ these the right way? What does that look like? Where are you guys seeing, or what lessons have you learned as you're thinking about sort of not just bringing folks into like a knowledge digital sort of more enabled, but also bringing them in like operating robots and things like that? It's a new sort of system of management and work for them. What's that been like?
Yeah, we strive to give everyone the easy button. It's the sense of like, we have to achieve the outcome, right? And depending upon the level of desire for the end customer to take that on, in terms of, do they want to run a robot? Do they want to, be manipulating the data and, running the analyses within their engineering orgs, or not? Some of the best customers are the ones that don't have any of that infrastructure. They're like, just help me solve the end problem, right? And you can end to end that quickly. But then in other ways, it's great to work with a more sophisticated organization that has the resources and can, take on the tools, and, you can train and enable and arm, and that creates scalability for a company like ours, when you sort of have someone on the other end that can, receive that and scale it up. So it can cut both ways for sure.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, where do you see, I'll ask this sort of intentionally broad, and you can kind of take this wherever you want. As you look, and you guys have this like really interesting position where you guys are working with, like global fortune sort of like thousands, and you're working in public sector, and you're seeing all of these different sort of organizations as they're trying to evolve. Where do you guys see like just the greatest opportunity for an industry or entities or a subset, however you want to frame it, to really kind of like lever into the future through an approach like you guys?
So something that Tyler, you probably know, and I think it's it's increasingly in the spotlight, but the key to growth is energy consumption. At the end of the day, they're so closely tied. And one of the things that I think we have gotten away from a bit here in the US, and I'm encouraged by sort of, and the president deserves credit, the current president deserves credit for this, is seeing this and investing here. But it's, we are at the precipice of an energy crisis. And we had the experience of, working across the globe, right? We've got a broad surface area, our aperture is wide. And what we've seen is just how critical energy is to everything else. It's the key input to global competitiveness when it comes to trade. It's the input to GDP per capita and our standard of living. And at the end of the day, we need more energy and we need it more cheaply. And, we have to be responsible about this. I always say emissions are bad, energy is good. And so, we really have to make sure that we have, the energy systems that we have today need to be invested in. And if we're going to make the transitions that we want to make, we have to be able to rely on the energy that we have today, the generation side, the grid. So I think singularly, this is like a huge emphasis for the company. It's where we got our start. But, everyone is shoring up their energy, right? Whether it be for the compute side of things and AI, onshoring of manufacturing. You see government agencies doing direct deals with energy providers like Constellation Energy, big, huge, multi-billion-dollar contracts. And, a lot of times that's all off the infrastructure of things that's been there for 20, 30, 40 years. And so we need to make sure that that stuff's going to be there when we need it. Increasing brownouts, increasing, grid resiliency issues. There's a lot of work to do here, but I do feel that there's a lot of optimism right now around we're going to get this right, and we have to get this right because this is what a number of our adversaries are it's sort of the pillar of their strategy, right, as a nation in terms of building out their energy infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is it's critical infrastructure, right? It's a national security issue for myriad reasons, right? Like whether it's grid resiliency or some of the redundancy and no single points of failure sort of around that. As you think about that as like the big sort of opportunity, the other side of that would be, where do you see risks, or where do you see things that folks are getting wrong, right? Like I'm sure there's like common mistakes or ways folks aren't deriving the right sort of value or thinking about it, right? If I said, hey, how are people like approaching this wrong and thinking about whether that's collecting data or revitalizing and sort of refurbishing infrastructure maintenance, where are people making mistakes? Where are they thinking about it wrong?
Yeah, I think that we oftentimes, and you see this on even where like the smartest people sort of go and naturally like fall to, but I think we get infatuated with the new things and we forget about the things that we already have. And I think these examples are so tangible, whether we're talking, look, we haven't built. We just put our first nuclear reactor online in like 12 years, it took 12 years. And prior to that, it was, Cold War era. And, the amount of people that are thinking about, okay, how to, build more capacity versus how many people are thinking about like, how do we get the most out of the capacity we have today? That split just feels off, right? And it's not like we shouldn't be focusing on the moonshots and we shouldn't be focusing on the things that are major breakthroughs. Absolutely should. But there's just this, we'll go to maybe a mining conference or one of these. We're the only tech company there. Like that seems wrong. That just fundamentally seems flawed. There's a lot of problems to solve out there. Gecko is solving a slice of it, but we need more innovators. We need more people looking at and the TAMs are huge, right? Like this is literally undergirds all of GDP, all of society. So I think that's something that we fundamentally have gotten wrong, over the years. And the same thing applies to defense. It's like all the smart people are focused on acquisitions. All the tech companies are focused on new acquisitions, new programs. What about all the platforms? What about all the things we have? O&M is like 2/3 of the budget. Why don't we get efficient there? Why don't we drive innovation there. Again, just not the sexy problem that people don't seem to gravitate towards, and I think that's a real miss.
Yeah, it's funny, right? One of the things I think I find myself muttering a lot is people will caveat with an idea or something. Hey, this isn't sexy. Yeah, but usually the not sexy stuff is the stuff that actually is going to move the needle, right? The sexy stuff, I think it'll, it gives you like the instant gratification, but it more often than not, which one, it's too far away to go drive sort of real impact immediately, and two, there's just work to do. But on that, taking a page from the sexy stuff or like the new thing, newish. As you guys are sort of working in between the hardware and software and data and insight and decision making, right? You can't turn a page on the internet right now without seeing somebody talking about AI and sort of what's coming. Like, where do you guys see that, bringing value to the ability to maybe make sense of some of the data or help to draw insight? And where do you think maybe there's work that still needs to be done, or it's a little on the hype cycle, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I think that AI is tremendously impactful for, not just generating the next predictive word in your email, or an image, and all the things that sort of we've seen through the large language models based upon what the internet sort of has out there. I think the real, where there's going to be a lot of value creation is, and AI at its, at its best, um, can be pretty neutral to positive, and at its worst can be very detrimental. And what I mean by that is it we need to fundamentally understand the data that we're putting into these models. And if we don't, we feed it bad data, it's going to give us really bad results. And so I think that's sort of the number one thing. And I think there's a problem today that if people can't really understand, what's in their databases, what are they measuring, what does it mean? If you can't do that in a more simplified way, like, just throwing it into an LLM to make sense of it all, probably isn't going to yield a great result. So we're looking at sort of very specific, sort of like less is more. Let's get like highly curated, highly, trustworthy data, and use that. And that's specifically how Gecko's deploying AI, and I think is a recipe for success if you go solve sort of an end-to-end workflow, or a series of workflows, versus just trying to kind of, put it all into one large model. We've seen these sort of approaches to create these massive data lakes and sort of hook up all the data, and I think it's structurally, foundationally the right thing to do, but those projects just go on and on forever, and then people still aren't sort of understanding what's even a unit level data mean, and how should I think about it. And
When
I've
you guys are in
yeah.
an interesting spot on that too, right? Is you're excuse me, as you're sort of deploying some of those robots out there, you're able to start to collect and kind of build, the right corpus of data by which you can get that, positive side of the value sort of curve from AI. I mean, are you seeing organizations that get excited about that, or do you guys have to sort of like not sort of like bring them along as the change management, but are you seeing resistance, or folks leaning in? What's that like?
EC is our customers putting a lot of trust in us to just not just in the data that we generate via the robots and the technology stacks we talked about, but also how to appropriately manage, secure, contextualize, and integrate their data sets operationally, etc.
It's
And
cool.
I think what's really awesome about that, again, is sort of like you can put wins on the board, and they've seen that sort of, and the impact happen within the organizations I think one of the biggest things is everyone knows that AI has tremendous potential, but they're like, how do I safeguard? How do I know I can roll this out? How do I know my people are going to make the right decisions? And so I think there is sort of a inherent trust that's built, and everyone right now is saying, I need to leverage this. Like, I'm being pushed by my board, by my stakeholders, to bring new technologies to bear. And a lot of times there's an AI component to that. And that's why, as a company, and we've long thought about this, that we are building the largest data repository for the physical world for material health of critical infrastructure, and that is going to sort of be the starting point for managing these assets much more intelligently, from the point of being commissioned and the process of being constructed all the way through to the end of life. Managing those digital threads from cradle to grave is really going to be tremendous amounts of value creation there.
Yeah.
But it's only really possible because of structured data that we can trust, high fidelity, high resolution, localized data. And so, yeah, we think that anyone building robots, can leverage this because it's a repeatable, auditable way of going about things. Like this can be done in a very trustworthy way. We'll just contrast that with what happened, prior to Gecko, and it's like we are relying on the human subjectivity around the Palm Pilot single point measurement reading. None of that data is structured, none of the underlying acoustic based signals saved. There's nothing to interrogate, there's nothing to audit. You are literally looking at a readout that's translated to a paper report, a PDF. And so there was never a lot of information to even, it's low fidelity, and not very repeatable in the sense that just couldn't be adjusted, right? It sort of served a purpose at a point in time, and that's about all it could be used for.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard I don't know if it was from you or Jake, I've heard the examples of, folks going out, tapping on steel and listening to it and making an annotation versus being able to actually go sense and collect sort of more 360 holistic data so you can get insight, and just extrapolating that microcosm into the transformation that's just enabled by that is, when you're talking like Stone Age to the digital world, right? Like, it's pretty material. It's it gets me to this. It's, as we sort of turn the corner, our last couple questions, the thinking about that, right? As we're talking about, hey, and I'm like oversimplifying, and I ran it for a little bit for like thematic sort of effect, but I've got like the guy hitting the rock with the hammer. So, it's caveman Tyler saying, like, okay, cool, this feels like it'll float. And then I've got, robot going out and sensing and flowing back into a corpus of data that we can compare and contrast over time and get all this insight, right? That's two different worlds, right? It's the Flintstones and the Jetsons. As you sit now and look to the future, what are you most excited about? Like, what's possible? You alluded to it a little bit about being able to build on it, but what's the way forward look like as you fired up?
And your description of the Flintstones is so accurate. I mean, it's you gotta add in there someone on a rope with a hammer, listening, and tapping on steel and concrete, and trying to hear frequency. You're just like, wow, this is either super scientific or completely aimless. So yeah, where are we going? I mean, there are some immense opportunities for the company. It's sort of the sort of first principle way that we built this company and multi-acts to the business. For us, how we're leveraging information and, helping our partners get more value out of it is in sort of that next transformation of helping to optimize on the operations side, going beyond sort of just the structural health and sort of living in the realm of, okay, is my asset going to fail and how is it going to fail and what do I do about it? But how do I actually optimize and fine tune these systems and pushing all this to the edge, getting all of our technology to the point where we don't actually have to bring things out of service. We don't have to take things offline. We can actually, access, diagnose, and remediate on the edge, right? And so that takes a lot of the technology to the edge, to the point where these assets can just create a lot more value. Today, the downtime in any of industries that we talk about. The U.S. Navy is like close to 60% downtime. That's how often their ships are, or submarines are waiting for a maintenance cycle or in an in sort of a dry dock scenario. And it doesn't get much better on the commercial side. And wow, tremendous amounts of opportunity to be able to keep that asset in the fight or keep that asset online and being productive. So there's more work to do here, but there is a tremendously bright future for our customers that invest in the partnerships and just continue to be innovative and to continue to push the envelope. We have much better feedback mechanisms today because of things like robotic sensors, AI. All of this can make these systems truly intelligent.
Yeah, dude, that freaking rocks. Which leads to last question, right? So when I ask everybody, king for a day, to wave your wand, change one thing. You don't have to caveat it. It's not like, hey, I need these 3 things to happen. What would you change? What would you make a reality, and why? And it can be anything.
So I've been, I'll go with a personal one. I've been, freezing my butt out here in Western PA. We've had below seasonal cold temperatures, and I just wish the mountains out here were a little larger, a little taller, a little wider. You get out in that lift line, and it's not that fun. Go down,
go shred it up a little more outside of Pittsburgh.
32nd down. So we need some Rockies out here, or some Adirondacks. Let's bring that to Western PA.
I like that.
I'd be a happy guy.
Dude, that's a great one, brother. I say it every time I see you guys. Like, you guys fire me up. Like, the mission you guys are on, the team you've built, the impact you guys are having, it just fucking rocks. So thank you for being there and what you guys are doing, and thanks for swinging by, dude. It was a pleasure.
Awesome, Tyler. Great to connect and great to chat, and really appreciate the support.
Heck yeah. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Cheers.